A famous actor, Keanu Reeves, is targeted by an abusive cop simply for being there. But the officer has no idea that his actions will set off a chain of events that reveal hidden truths. What happens when the world learns the injustices Keanu has endured? That afternoon, Keanu sat quietly on a city street, blending in with a hoodie and cap, just another face in the crowd. After years in the spotlight, he craved these rare moments of peace. But peace never lasts. Footsteps echoed. A figure loomed. Officer Walker, notorious for his unchecked aggression, stopped in front of him. "You think you can just sit here?" Walker's tone was mocking, his eyes filled with disdain. Keanu remained calm, his instincts sharpening. "This isn't a place for people like you," Walker continued, sizing him up. Keanu exhaled, keeping his composure. "I'm not doing anything wrong." Walker sneered. "You don't get it, do you? I decide what's right or wrong." Tension thickened. Keanu had faced corruption before, on screen and in life, but this was different. "Stand up," Walker ordered, his hand grazing his baton. Keanu didn't move. "I'm not breaking any laws." Walker's face darkened. With sudden force, he shoved Keanu's son, then grabbed his arm roughly. "Here, I am the law." Keanu felt the officer's grip tighten, years of past struggles flashing through his mind. This wasn't just harassment, it was a test of power. And then, "Take your hands off him, now." A commanding voice cut through the air. Everything was about to change. Walker turned, his eyes narrowing. A man stood nearby, firm and unwavering. Daniel Reed. "Who are you?" Walker sneered. "This isn't your business. Move along." Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm yet sharp. "I saw everything, and I won't stand by while you abuse your power." Keanu glanced at Daniel, feeling a rare sense of gratitude. Until now, he had been alone. Walker tightened his grip. "You should stay out of police matters if you don't want trouble." Daniel didn't flinch. "I'll take my chances, but if you think this will go unchallenged, you're mistaken." Walker hesitated. He knew he couldn't cross certain lines, not with a witness present. With a huff, he let go of Keanu and stepped back. "I'll remember this," he muttered, "and you should remember. No one's always going to be here to protect you." Daniel squared his shoulders. "We'll see who really needs protection, Officer Walker." Walker lingered for a moment, then turned on his heel and left. Keanu exhaled, tension finally easing. He turned to Daniel, his voice low but sincere. "Thank you." Daniel nodded. "Anytime." But Keanu knew this wasn't over. Justice needed to be served. Before they could take their next step, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Another patrol car pulled up, two officers emerging with unreadable expressions. "We need you to come with us," one said, his voice cold. Daniel stepped forward. "This is wrong." Keanu stopped him with a steady look. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." Daniel hesitated, his jaw clenched. "I'll call a lawyer. Don't say a word without one." Keanu gave a small, firm nod. "I know." Sliding into the patrol car, he felt the chill of the metal seat, the reality of what was happening sinking in. City lights flashed past, but he didn't feel fear, only determination. At the station, Keanu was led through sterile hallways, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. The scent of disinfectant clung to the air. Inside the interrogation room, silence wrapped around him like a noose. He sat, placing his hands lightly on the table. His fingers trembled slightly from the adrenaline, but he took a slow breath, grounding himself. He had faced challenges before. Moments that tested him, moments where he had to prove himself. This was just another battle. The door creaked open, and it was about to begin. Walker entered, his cold smile dripping with arrogance. "You think having someone stand up for you changes anything?" His voice sliced through the silence. "You think you've won?" Keanu met his gaze without hesitation. His heartbeat was steady. "I don't think I've won," he replied, calm and deliberate. "But I know this is just the beginning." Walker's smirk faded. He took a step back, his anger barely contained. "You'll see who really has the power here," he sneered before storming out, slamming the door behind him. Silence returned, but Keanu no longer felt helpless. He felt something stronger: determination. This wasn't just about him, it was about justice. The door swung open again. Sandra Mills entered, her sharp eyes radiating confidence. Behind her, Daniel stood firm, his concern evident. "Keanu," Sandra said, her voice steady. She pulled out a chair, flipping open her briefcase. Daniel sat beside him. "Sandra's one of the best. We're not letting this go." Sandra met Keanu's gaze. "We'll expose Walker and anyone protecting him, but I need every detail." Keanu inhaled deeply and recounted everything. Walker's arrogance, the intimidation, the wrongful arrest. His voice carried frustration and the weight of injustice. Sandra listened, taking notes, her eyes narrowing. Daniel clenched his fists. "Walker's history is full of abuse," Sandra said. "No one's ever stopped him. But now, that changes." Keanu exhaled. "What's our next move?" Sandra closed her notebook. "We sue. Walker, the police chief, everyone responsible. This isn't just one bad cop. It's a broken system." "They'll fight back," Daniel warned. "They'll smear your name." Keanu's jaw tightened. "Let them try. I've faced worse. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been silenced." Sandra nodded, a rare smile forming. "Then let's start. I'm calling the press. Walker messed with the wrong man." For a long moment, the room was silent. Not with fear, but with the anticipation of a battle. A battle for justice, not just for Keanu, but for countless others. News of Keanu Reeves' lawsuit spread like wildfire, dominating headlines nationwide. Hollywood icon takes a stand against corrupt cop. Keanu Reeves versus the system, a fight for justice. Actor challenges abuse of power. Will the system listen? Standing by his office window, Keanu watched the city below, feeling the weight of what was coming. The real fight was just beginning. His phone buzzed. "Daniel." "Keanu, have you read the comments?" His voice was tense. "There's a lot of support, but also backlash." Keanu sighed. "I've seen them." His screen was flooded with mixed reactions, some praising his courage, others dismissing him as attention-seeking. This is just another publicity stunt. Keanu Reeves playing the victim? Please. He just wants to stay relevant. He had expected this. People would always twist the truth. Daniel's tone grew serious. "This is just the beginning. They'll try to discredit you, but you're not alone." Sandra's ready to fight back. Keanu watched the cars below, remembering his struggles as a kid, fighting to be heard. He had fought before. He would fight again. "I know, Daniel. I'm ready." A knock at the door. Sandra entered, a thick file in hand. "Keanu, we need to talk." He turned to face her. "What is it?" "The press conference," she said, setting the file on his desk. "This is our chance to control the narrative. It needs to be your story, not theirs." Keanu nodded. "I understand." "But be prepared," Sandra warned. "They'll try to twist your words, make you the villain." Daniel sat beside him. "You're not alone in this. We've got your back." Keanu took a slow breath. This was bigger than him. This was about making sure no one else had to suffer in silence. The room was packed. Cameras flashed. Reporters murmured. Their anticipation thick in the air. Keanu stepped to the podium, heart steady, gaze firm. Sandra stood in the corner, arms crossed over her legal files, watching, ready. "Thank you for being here," Keanu began, his voice cutting through the noise. The room hushed. "I stand here today not just for myself, but for everyone who has been silenced. Abuse of power must end. It's time for change." Questions flew at him, some supportive, others sharp-edged. An older journalist adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Reeves, do you truly believe this is about justice? Or are you just trying to boost your public image?" Keanu met his gaze, unwavering. "I don't need to bolster my image," he said, his voice firm. "I built my career on hard work, not headlines. I never wanted this fight. But when injustice happens, silence is not an option." A ripple spread through the room. Some reporters nodded, others scribbled furiously. From the corner, Sandra gave him the slightest nod of approval. The battle was far from over. But Keanu knew one thing. He wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. "I'm not doing this for fame or money. This is about dignity, about stopping abuse, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever been silenced." The room shifted. Every eye was on Keanu Reeves. not just as a world-famous actor, but as a symbol of resilience. Daniel gave a subtle nod of pride. Sandra stood beside him, her gaze filled with quiet determination. They had made the right decision in taking this fight public. Keanu stepped out of the press room, exhaustion settling into his muscles, but his resolve remained unshaken. The golden glow of the setting sun clashed with the storm brewing beneath the surface. His words weren't just a defense, they were a declaration. As they entered the lobby, a police officer stood waiting, badge gleaming under the ceiling lights. Daniel tensed. Sandra, ever the strategist, adjusted the stack of legal documents in her arms. The officer stepped forward. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice low but steady, "I'm Officer Grant. I need to speak with you." Sandra's tone remained firm. "We're listening." Grant swallowed hard before continuing. "I've worked with Walker for years. I know who he really is and what he's done." His voice grew heavy. "I've seen him abuse his power, targeting those who couldn't fight back. And I stayed silent, out of fear." Keanu felt a wave of emotion. A cop breaking rank to speak out was rare. Risky. "What changed?" Keanu asked, his voice calm but intense. Grant exhaled. "Watching you stand up, I realized I couldn't keep looking the other way. Walker's actions don't just hurt people. They destroy trust in the system, in people like me." Daniel leaned forward. "You understand this could cost you everything, don't you?" Grant offered a weary smile. "I do, but if I stay silent now, I'll never be able to look at myself in the mirror again. Justice is worth the price." Sandra's sharp gaze softened with respect. "If you're willing to testify, it will change everything." Grant met Keanu's eyes, his resolve firm. "I'm ready. Whatever you need, I'll provide it. The truth has to come out." The air in the lobby shifted, not with tension, but with trust. Keanu felt something powerful take root inside him. He wasn't just fighting Walker. He wasn't just fighting a system. He was gaining allies. "Thank you," Keanu said, his voice sincere. "You don't know how much of this means. To me, and to everyone who's suffered." Grant's faint smile carried a rare warmth. "No need to thank me. This is something I should have done long ago." As Grant walked away to prepare, Keanu turned to Daniel and Sandra. No words were needed, just a shared understanding. "We just gained a major ally," Sandra said, her voice firm. "Now we need to move fast." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Keanu's shoulder. "We're making a difference, and you're at the center of it." Keanu gazed out at the city as the twilight sky deepened. A new strength surged within him. Justice was no longer an ideal. It was coming. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Reporters, supporters, and onlookers filled the space, their voices a tense hum. Camera flashes lit up the steps as Keanu Reeves entered, his expression firm. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Keanu sat beside Sandra at the plaintiff's table, his posture composed yet alert. Behind them, Daniel's steady presence was unwavering. Across the room, Walker entered with a cold stare, flanked by his lawyers. He tried to project confidence, but Keanu saw the flicker of tension in his eyes. Sandra rose, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice cutting through the room. "This case isn't just about one man's abuse of power. It's about a system that allows it to happen." The jury listened, their faces heavy with responsibility. "Call Officer Grant to the stand." A hush fell over the room. Grant stepped up, tension in his posture but confidence in his voice. "I worked with Walker for years. I saw his abuse, and I stayed silent. For too long." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Grant detailed Walker's unchecked brutality, his voice unwavering. With each testimony, the weight in the room grew heavier. Keanu watched Walker's grip tighten on the table, his shoulders stiffening. The truth was breaking through. Sandra turned to Grant. "Thank you, officer." She exchanged a glance with Keanu, silent but clear. They had secured a crucial foothold. But Walker's legal team wasn't backing down. His lawyer adjusted his tie, his smile forced. "Officer Grant, you've worked with Walker for years. Do you have a personal vendetta against him?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Grant. The battle was far from over. This fight isn't about fame. It's about dignity, about stopping abuse, not just for me, but for everyone who has been silenced. Keanu's words shifted the courtroom's energy. He wasn't just an actor. He was a man taking a stand. Daniel gave him a nod of pride. Sandra, unwavering beside him, offered silent encouragement. Keanu left the courtroom, his body exhausted, but his resolve unshaken. The late afternoon sun painted the city gold. His words weren't just for his defense. They were for every unheard voice. In the courthouse lobby, a police officer stood waiting. His badge gleamed under the lights. Daniel tensed. Sandra gripped her documents a little tighter. The officer approached. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Officer Grant. We need to talk." Keanu exchanged a glance with Daniel and Sandra. "We're listening, Officer Grant," Sandra said, her tone steady but cautious. Grant exhaled, his voice heavy. "I've worked with Walker for years. I've seen him abuse his power, target the defenseless. And I stayed silent, out of fear, out of pressure." Keanu felt something shift. A cop turning against his own was rare. "What changed?" Keanu asked, his voice quiet but firm. Grant's regret was clear. "Watching you stand up, I realized I couldn't keep looking away. What Walker does isn't just wrong, it destroys trust in the system." Daniel leaned in. "You know this could cost you everything." Grant nodded, a tired but determined smile forming. "I know, but if I don't do this now, I'll never be able to look at myself in the mirror. Justice is worth the risk." Sandra studied him, her sharp eyes softening with respect. "If you testify, it changes everything." Grant met Keanu's gaze, his regret turning into conviction. "I'm ready. Whatever you need, I'll provide it. The truth about Walker has to be known." A silence settled, but it wasn't fear. It was trust. Keanu felt something powerful shift inside him. He wasn't just fighting Walker or the system, he was gaining allies. "Thank you, Grant," Keanu said. "You don't know how much this means, not just to me, but to everyone who's suffered." Grant's faint smile carried warmth. "No need to thank me. This is long overdue." As Grant left to prepare, Keanu turned to Daniel and Sandra. The unspoken understanding between them was clear. "This battle just changed," Sandra said. "We need to move fast." Daniel placed a hand on Keanu's shoulder. "We're making a difference, and you're at the center of it." Keanu exhaled, looking out at the city as the streetlights flickered on. He felt a fire inside him. Justice wasn't a distant hope anymore. It was happening. Outside the courthouse, the steps were packed. Reporters, supporters, and onlookers filled the space. Camera flashes sparked endlessly as Keanu walked up, every step watched. Inside, tension thickened the air. Keanu took his seat at the plaintiff's table. Sandra reviewed her notes one last time. Behind them, Daniel's quiet strength was unwavering. At the defense table, Walker sat stiffly. His face was calm, but his white-knuckled grip on the table betrayed him. His lawyers whispered, scrambling for an angle. Sandra rose, her heels clicking against the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice cutting through the room. "This case isn't just about one officer abusing power. It's about what happens when we allow corruption to go unchecked." She met the jurors' eyes. "Today, we aren't just deciding the fate of one man. We are deciding whether we as a society tolerate this or demand accountability." A quiet ripple of agreement passed through the jury. Walker's lawyers, though composed, had lost their initial confidence. Their final rebuttal was weak, their defenses unraveling. Then, it was time for the jury to deliberate. The courtroom emptied into silence. Keanu sat in silence, eyes fixed on the clock. Each tick stretched endlessly. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Finally, the doors opened. The jury returned, their foreman holding a slip of paper. The courtroom fell still. The jury find the defendant, Officer Bryce Walker, guilty on all counts." A wave of emotion swept the room. Gasps, hushed murmurs, even quiet applause. Walker sat frozen, pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. His lawyers whispered furiously, scrambling to contain the fallout. Keanu felt the weight lift from his chest. Sandra allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Daniel stood, his eyes shining with relief and pride. Outside, the crowd had been waiting. As Keanu stepped onto the courthouse steps, cheers erupted, applause rolling like thunder. Supporters surrounded him, admiration in their eyes. Camera flashes lit up the moment. A young reporter stepped forward, voice trembling. Mr. Reeves, do you have anything to say? Keanu took a deep breath, his gaze filled with gratitude and resolve. Today, we proved that justice isn't a privilege. It's a right. This isn't just my victory. It's for everyone who has been silenced, dismissed, or ignored. I hope that from this moment on, no one has to fear speaking the truth. The crowd erupted in applause. Keanu turned to Daniel and Sandra, their proud smiles reflecting his own. This wasn't just a court victory, it was proof that the fight had been worth it. After the congratulations, Daniel pulled Keanu aside. "You did it," he said, his voice warm. "You've changed more than you realize." Keanu smiled. "We did it," he corrected. And with that, he stepped forward, knowing this was just the beginning.